Welcome back to another episode of the Idaho Vibes Talk Show. Today we've got another guest with us, Emma, another co-host for this episode here. So we got D-Dog and Emma in the studio. We're going to talk about the lawsuit that's going on with the city of Idaho Falls there might be multiple lawsuits. So it's going to be the lawsuit around the impact fees with the city of Idaho Falls. So let's give a quick overview of what an impact fee is before we kind of talk about the lawsuit. An impact fee is a fee that has been charged to builders or developers to help the city offset the cost of growth, right? So when a developer is bringing in a new subdivision or a townhome development or anything like that, they're going to pay these impact fees because, yes, they have to put in roadways or whatever to get to the subdivision because there might be some growth there that they need to spread out the roadway or whatever. I know Rockwell's done that in a few of their subdivisions. But there's also just other infrastructure that needs to go into the city if you're bringing in 300, 400, 500 homes. So that's what they're trying to offset is the additional infrastructure costs of having a larger population in the city. So we didn't used to have impact fees. So that's actually been something that's been fairly recent. I think it was like 2022 or 3.
The June 2022, they came out with the initial ordinance for the impact fee, and then I think 2023 they did an addendum to it. But yeah, before that it was no impact fee.
So something new, and the Builders Association has decided to sue the city in regards to the impact fees. What are your thoughts on the initial, just the impact fee being added to Idaho Falls?
I think an impact fee makes a ton of sense. If you're going to be bringing in, more than 20 homes in a singular block, that's a ton of new traffic.
Mm-hmm.
I think that they're necessary. I just think, like all things in life, balance is key and proper expectations on both sides matter.
100%.
Yeah, and I think prior to 2022, our growth in Idaho Falls wasn't exponential enough to where, the requirements that they had for the developers to widen the road, they would have them do those initial projects, but then the increase in taxes from the people buying those homes kind of covered the other stuff because we were growing at a slow enough pace or a maintainable space that they didn't need it.
Mm-hmm.
But we all know that around 2021, 2022, we blew up. And I think that was the city's way of implementing that to try to catch up with some of these projects, because we're talking everything from like emergency services to bringing utilities out to these places to widening roads to, schools and different things like that. I mean, that's all part of trying to catch up to that increase that we've had.
Yeah. It feels like the hard thing is it feels like it was, we were playing catch up. So we weren't proactive with it. So we were reactive, saw this big spike in growth, and now it's like, oh shiz, we need to charge some impact fees. And when you're reactive in those situations, things don't get ironed out totally. Maybe there is, they're trying to charge more than they should normally because they're trying to play catch up. But the whole premise of this though is like, the hard part is to a builder or developer, the impact fee just becomes another line item on their budget. So it's like, hey, our cost to build now went up, $3,500 per unit or per door. It's not like the developer's not just going to eat that cost. And I think that's what a lot of people forget is like, yeah, well, let's take some of the profit from these builders or developers and give it to the city to help with infrastructure. Well, it's like you're not taking the profit from the builder or developer. A developer or builder is going to look at a project and they're going to say, hey, we want X% margin. We want a 20 to 30% margin if we're going to do this project. Well, now they're looking at that project. They're still going to shoot for their same 20 or 30% margin, and they're just going to increase their cost of construction with this impact fee, which is just going to raise the price at the end. The sales price is just going to increase because they're going to say, oh, our cost to build now is more, therefore we need to sell it for more. And so I think that's where people get confused is like, well, let's take the money from the builders. It's like, well, they're just either one, they're going to pass it on to the consumer, or they're just not going to build. Because like if the profit margins aren't there for the metrics that they want to hit, they're just not going to do it.
So either way, it comes back to the consumer because either, they're paying a little bit more when they're purchasing the homes or there's not as much construction, there's not as much supply, then the cost of homes goes up. So either way, the consumer is the one that ends up paying in the situation.
Yeah, 100%. What are your thoughts on that, Emma?
I think both builders and consumers having to pay the bottom line would feel a lot better about it if they could see the direct correlation of where those fees are going. Because right now, a builder will pay, like, for example, we had a development that was like 48 doors going up, and the city impact fees were like $65,000. To what? Is that going into a new street light near the development? Is that going to a school near where we're building? The impact here that like this builder is making? And if we're passing that on to the people who are going to end up buying the home, is that going to a crosswalk in their neighborhood? Where does it go? I think when people can see where their fees are going, they're going to be way more open and like way more willing to be like, yeah, that makes sense.
So in your experience, I mean, what does the city provide? Do they just say, hey, we did the assessment study, we did the impact study, and now your impact fee is X amount? Do they provide you with documentation saying, it is $65,000 because of X, Y, and Z that we see needing to be done after doing this study? Because in my knowledge of reading the ordinance, like even in the ordinance that they put out, it says that they have to basically disclose where that money's going. So what in your experience have you seen is received by the developer showing the need for that impact fee?
Yeah, they definitely give you a study and they say, you're bringing this many people, this many cars, this many commutes. Like they go into detail about all those things, but they'll just say that, this is going to it'll widen a roadway. They won't say which one. And I think that's a problem, because like we have, let's take Fremont, right? I just moved into a townhome on Fremont, and there's like 27 townhomes on one side. There's like 18 to 26 on the other side. And those are all people. Those are all families that live on Fremont. There's no crosswalk right now. So where did those city impact fees go?
Which is interesting because in the ordinance itself, it says that the impact fees that are collected can only go towards what they said that they were collected for. They can't go towards other projects or other things. They can't commingle the money. And so to your point, if they said that was what it is for, or just generally stated that it was to widen a road but didn't tell you what road, is that part of the lawsuit? Is they're not being clear enough with what they're saying the impact fees are for, and two, aren't actually doing the projects that they say those impact fees are for?
I think it's partially that, and also partially I'm not sure that I don't know what the baseline is for the fees, because we'll have 48 doors going up in one neighborhood and it's 65,000. We'll have 24 going up in a different neighborhood and it's still 65,000. But wait, isn't the impact double on the other one?
Yeah, which is interesting because when I was reading through it, it says the impact study uses a calculation methodology in accordance with generally accepted accounting practices. What does that mean?
Yeah,
generally accepted accounting practices.
Talk about a blanket term.
It's the iPhone calculator.
Right. It's some guy just.
Pretty sure Enron used those terms.
Yeah, and that
we all know who that
so
went.
well.
Just kidding. No, but and I think we've hit on some key points there. It's like this lawsuit is trying to but is saying that the city wasn't clear enough in how they were using those funds. And so let's read. So there's certain criteria, like with the impact fees. Fees must be proportionate to the impact of the development, which I think that's kind of like subjective, right?
Yeah, it's like carbon dating. We're using old data to date data. Like, who's impact relative to what?
Yeah.
Right.
Proportionate to the impact of the development, and then funds collected must be used for specific purposes outlined when the fees were imposed, and then there must be clear connection between the fees collected and the improvements funded by those fees. How this shakes out, I mean, it's so hard to say because I'm like, to pick a side of, the city obviously needs impact fees. They need some help with infrastructure if the city's going to continue to grow. Yes, maybe that the best way to collect that fee is to go to builders and developers and have that impact on new construction. My thing is like, why is it so hard to make things clear and with any part of the government? Like, why can't we just show transparency?
I mean, at the end of the day, that's what people want. Like, in my opinion, it's not that people necessarily aren't okay with paying some taxes or things like that. I think people are okay with that if there's transparency and they know exactly how it's going to benefit the community. But I feel like government entities don't like transparency because it holds them accountable.
Well, and I think the reason that they struggle with that is because you have two options. You can be reactive, which is why we're in this mess, or you can be proactive. And the tricky part about being proactive and transparent is people will find loopholes every time. So you can't be too transparent, but you have to be, holistic enough in your proactivity with your impact fees and what they are and what they go for, that it can apply to all builders and all people who make an impact without being too specific that it's too easy for them to find wormholes.
Right. Well, I feel like it should be not a simple equation, but it should be pretty straightforward, where you have these certain thresholds of, okay, a certain street, if it has a certain amount of traffic at a certain threshold, it needs to be widened. So currently it's at this. If you're going to add 500 homes, we predict that it's going to increase to this. You're going to have to widen the road. Okay, I understand that. Or, we need a certain amount of fire trucks per population in this area. This is going to increase that. We're going to need another fire truck. Like, it should be that straightforward and transparent. So I don't know why they aren't able to do that. And maybe it's just my lack of understanding on what all it entails, but I feel like it should be pretty straightforward with those thresholds.
Yeah.
I think there could also, this is an assumption, by the way, but I think there's also a part of it where how much does it cost to widen a road? If it's, and this is totally ballpark, but let's say it's going to cost like $400,000 to widen the road, and you have a new developer that wants to come and build something, and their impact fees are only going to be $65,000. Well, you don't have enough to widen the road. You're only part of the impact, and that's part of the proactive part of it. They're trying not to be reactive, right? They want to have enough money to widen the road when it reaches a threshold, but they don't have it yet. And I think that there's an element of that we just don't see as builders, developers, and taxpayers and homeowners. Mm-hmm. But I think it's there, Yeah,
there has to be a lot of planning ahead of time.
Totally.
I think that's the hard thing to stay on top of is, like you said, you're collecting for future expenses that maybe that one development we don't need to increase the roadway just for that development, but we need a portion of that roadway to be covered when the time is necessary. And it almost needs to be like, and maybe they do this forecasting of like how much vacant land there is in this roadway. It's like, okay, well, we've got X, what are our zoning requirements? How many what is the maximum density that these could provide? Okay, then we could assume that we might get an increase of 1,000 units down this roadway. In the next 10 years, we need to start accounting for getting the cost to get this roadway widened. I know it's a tricky game. That's why it's like, it's hard to say the city's at fault or, and cheer for the builders to win this. And I don't think the builders are trying to get away with the impact fees, even though it says they're possible is to either get to remove the impact fees, eliminate them, or to have more transparency within how the fees are getting used. And I think that is the ultimate goal.
And I think it's more about transparency, because when I was reading through the East Idaho Building Association paperwork, it straight up said in there, they're not trying to get rid of the impact fee. Like, they understand the reasoning behind an impact fee. But, when you have a development going in that, based on other projects you've done and stuff, you're assuming the impact fee is going to be $300,000, and all of a sudden it comes back at $1 million.
Yeah.
Not really an explanation of why there's that difference. That's what they're upset about. It doesn't seem like there's really been any rhyme or reason, and they're not getting the evidence behind it to feel comfortable with what's going on.
Yeah.
Well, and I think the city's giving some mixed messages to builders, because there's tons of incentive. Like, we want people to build. We want new growth. We want new development. We want, neighborhoods to be cleaned up. We want, like, the West Side, they call it the crap hole. But I think it's a lovely place. But then they're like, we want people to go build there. There's like a gentrification that can happen, but you have to pay. You're going to have to pay for the incentive that we also want. And I think that is what it comes down to. Like, the frustration is, you seem to want me to do this, but now you're also going to make me pay an, unknown number for something that I'm not going to see the seed of or the legacy of, maybe ever. And what happens when that $400,000 road, nobody else builds? So the impact always sits at that $65,000 that you paid. And that never goes to, what happens? What happens if the rest of the impact never comes to supplement the other, amount that's needed for a road widening? your fees just go where?
Yeah.
That's what we'd like to know.
Exactly.
It's I'm really excited for what is to come with Elon going in and doing this whole government kind of cleanup. Because it's like I feel like there's so many places where it's like we just don't know where money goes as like taxpayers, and on a city, on a local level, but on a national level, it's like, dude, they're just like money just disappears. And it's like, yeah, like you said, where if that sits in there for 6-7 years, like what happens to it? Does it just sit there? Is it getting used for other things? Like,
well, and just seeing how the government operates. I mean, I know quite a few people that work in government jobs, whether it be at INL or Hanford in Washington, and it's so frustrating hearing the stories of, yeah, it's a super awesome job. I go out there, I basically have like 4 hours of work, and then I just sit there because they won't let us do anything else. We're just sitting there getting paid. And it's like, okay, that's great.
yeah,
And then you hear about like these departments of, okay, let's say they have a $2 million budget for these. Well, they get to the end of the year and they're just buying whatever because they know that if they don't hit that budget, then the government's going to lower their budget for the next year. It's like, why is there not more overreach in this of the overspending? If that's not a sure sign that we're overspending, because that's just like one or two people talking, but there's thousands and thousands and thousands of people employed at these government facilities, and there's basically one or two or three in every state.
yeah.
That's crazy.
I've heard rumors that there's a whole warehouse full of new computers out at the INL because they expense the rest of their budget, buy a bunch of stuff, and then it just goes into storage.
Yeah, I don't know about that, but
We ride at dawn.
I know
We got to go find out.
I know for sure with the security teams out there, they have basically a warehouse full of ammo because that's
Oh, yeah.
like when they get to the end of the year with their budget, they just spend the rest of it on ammo and throw it in this bunker, and it's like great.
Yeah, I think we'll see a shift though before, like, regardless of political affiliations. Project 2020, that whole dossier came out of their plan, and one of the massive points of it is the federal budget that we just don't have. Yeah. We say that we're going to have a budget. Nobody checks it monthly. Nobody checks it annually. We're just spending.
No checks and balances.
There's no checks and balances. No.
Could you imagine running a company like that? That'd be awesome.
That would be bankrupt in a year. Like,
well, but then having the power to not go bankrupt.
Yeah,
because you're just printing your own money.
Print more money, exactly. It's like you're playing Monopoly.
Great.
You're just like, oh, dang it. Well, let's just have fun and take some more money and play.
You know what?
You go to the casino, you lose all your money. You're like, oh, no big deal. I'll just kind of grab some more.
Print more.
Money. Yeah.
Let me loan it to myself that I'll pay back at a future date.
It's just Monopoly. You're going to take it from this pocket and put it in this pocket.
Yeah.
So and that's happening on a large scale, and we're just talking about our eastern Idaho area.
Yeah.
And it's happening, and it's hard.
There's just so much that I think the hard part is people are starting to get tired of how much money is feeling like it's going to waste. And I think that's part of the premise with this is I think builders and developers are just feeling like the money's not being used properly and they don't know where it's going. And I think that should be, if you're a taxpayer, like you should be concerned or want to know where your money's going. When I write a check to the IRS, like I would be nice to know where the stuff is going and that it's not going to just 50 new computers to get bought at the INL that nobody's going to use. And I think that's what people want. I think people on a national level, on a local level, I think builders, I think consumers, because like we said at the beginning, consumers are the ones that are actually paying this bill. It's funny because it's like the impact fee is to help the city with infrastructure costs without relying on current taxpayers to front the bill. But ultimately, like new homeowners coming in, it could be current taxpayers, are going to be footing the bill just because they're going to have to deal with higher home prices.
Here's an interesting topic, too, that I've kind of thought about and talked to people about. You live in the county. Let's say you live in the county of Idaho Falls. Your taxes on the house, let's say roughly 3,000, 4,000 square feet, might be $1,800 to $2,200. Whereas when you live in the city, right, you're 3,000 plus 4,000. I mean 5,000, depending on what neighborhood you're in.
Over double, yeah.
That even feels really low. Like, yeah.
But the interesting thing is, like, all those people that live in the county, they still drive the roads. They still go to Walmart. They still use all these services other than the public utilities, really. I know, for instance, when we've talked to Jace, he said that's kind of an issue with Shelley because really the city of Shelley is pretty small.
Yeah.
A lot of people live in the county, and they've had a really hard time where the taxes in Shelley have to be pretty dang high to cover those things because there's so many people who live in the county but come into the city to use the services. So I always think that's kind of an interesting thing, and I wonder how that possibly could be addressed.
Yeah, and you look at it, things only get annexed to the city once they're on city utilities. So it's like it's a hard game because it's like you can't. How far can you spread out the city?
Yeah.
Because the cost of spreading out utilities before you can actually get taxpayer revenue. So it's an interesting. Yeah, it's.
And when it gets annexed in, it's annexed in after a developer has paid the impact fees and developed the neighborhood usually. So it's interesting.
Yeah.
I think right now people just want affordable like housing, affordable anything. And this is just one more thing that's going to
Make
a
it
little
harder.
hurdle. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. And then it's like, and if if they don't have the impact fees, then it's like, what are the other solutions? Do they just raise taxes? Which again, just hurts affordability. It's just a weird position right now. And I think, I don't know what the right answer is. I'm like, I don't want to be a person that just comes in and is like, man, it's just messed up and not provide solutions. But it's also really hard to try to provide solutions when there's really no transparency into how things are actually done.
Right.
And so I'm like, it would be nice to know, how is a city valuing their impact fees? How are they accounting for where that money is kept and where it's going? And how are they projecting growth in relation to like how much they're going to charge for the impact fees on a certain development or project? I feel like AI needs to get involved. We just need to bring in AI, give all the data, and let AI do the predictions.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll eventually. I mean, really, when you're talking about doing an impact study, and like you said, let's say that there's a road that needs to be put in, but through the impact study, they're saying, okay, this development really, we're finding, needs to cover about 15% of that total road cost because there's X amount of land that we're assuming will be developed over the next 6 years. And we're going to clump that together and do this road. But I feel like builders would be okay with that as long as it's broken out that way, saying, hey, we did this impact. It's going to cost $400,000 to put this road in. With where you're at and how much housing you're putting in, we're basically putting 15% of that cost on you. Then, okay, that makes sense. But I don't think that's necessarily what's happening currently.
Do you know what I'm actually curious about? Is how much does it cost to do an impact study? How much of the impact fee is just going towards doing the impact study?
I would guess probably like 10, 11 grand.
That's what drives me nuts. Is like, and I don't know the solution to that either. Maybe AI comes in, can help do impact studies. But I feel like the cost to just do a study to get an idea of what it should costs so freaking much.
Oh,
so,
yeah.
So it's like, how do you, I don't know. It's just this.
And and I wonder how many builders have done like a private study too. Because when I was reading through the ordinance, they said, hey, you're more than welcome. Like the city's going to do theirs. And I'm guessing, assuming impose those fees on you through the impact fee. But, you're able to do a private one using a qualified person, whatever that means.
Yeah.
I'm wondering how many builders or if anybody has paid to do their own and, what the results of those were versus, the city doing their own.
Yeah.
So we've been learning about IFRA districts, which is if you have a piece of land that has blight or is just unusable, no one's going to want to live on it or build on it, you can have an IFRA district basically zoned to you, and then you get benefiting. It's almost like, I can only think of it to describe it if you're in the finance world as like an 83B election, but basically whatever the value of your tax on that land is now is what it will be for X number of years if you can get it, zoned as an IFRA district. But here's the catch. In order to do that, you have to pay for a $50,000 study that proves, even though I can look and see like, oh, the homeless are setting up a mid-century modern tarp over there and like this whole thing is lava. I can see that. I can like name all the ways that this is already blight, and building anything on here would be an improvement. But if I want that tax basis, I have to do the $50,000 study to be able to prove that this is an IFRA district, could qualify.
And if you pay for the $50,000 tax study and it doesn't, you just flushed 50 grand down the toilet.
And here's more impact fees. So, yeah, it's kind of wild.
Yeah.
It's it's frustrating. Like, and our rules and requirements and regulations are way better than a lot of other places. So I'm like, I don't want to complain too much. I'm like, you go try to build a development in California, like, good luck. It's going to take you 10 years because of all the stuff and costs you crazy amounts of money. But you look at what that has done to their local economy too, as far as home prices and valuations. So it's like, it's a balance, I think. And I don't know what that balance is, but it's a balance of, trying to get ahead of any kind of future growth problems. Make sure the city has funds for those. But also not destroying incentive for builders and developers. Because at the end of the day, that only hurts the consumer. Like you said, less supply means home prices are going to go up. Or cost of construction goes up because of all the city impact fees, home values go up. So at the end of the day, you need to own a home, because it sounds like home values are just going to go up regardless.
Yeah. Well, there's definitely something going on here. Definitely a lot of room for improvement. It's not like this is a lawsuit coming from one developer or one builder. I mean, this is coming from the building association that's got over 100 different businesses and builders involved with this. A lot of which build in other cities and even other states. And so they're familiar with the processes in other cities and the lawsuits happening in Idaho Falls. So there's definitely something going on that needs to be improved. And like they said, it's not like they're trying to get rid of the impact fee. They understand that it's needed. It's just that they want it to be fair and, relative to the projects that are being done and have that transparency.
Yeah.
Well, it could be really interesting if they started being more transparent about, hey, there's an impact study going on here. We want to do these things with an impact study. And I feel like with that, it would not sway, but you could align builders to, like, let's tackle this part of town and let's just totally fulfill the capacity of impact fees and just have this part of town, like, truly and well developed, instead of just, like, picking random parcels of land all around and being like, well, I guess we got 10% of all the impact everywhere. Like,
yeah, it's true. I mean, you think about, like, go back to, like, incentive drives behavior. Like, the city could incentivize certain locations to get built. Like, you could even, let's say they want growth. They also need to have a better pulse on where their impact fees are going to come from and what they can use those impact fees for. So they're not having a development on the north side of town and on the west side of town. And it's like, well, we can't improve either roadway because we don't have the funds enough. But if we had them close enough to each other, we could have enough funds to improve the infrastructure of this location. So it's like, you could just discount the impact fees in a certain area. Like, what if they did, like, a map, kind of like their
our parcel viewer? You can just go and click on it.
Yeah, you got the parcel viewer map, but, like, what's the thing that the city plans out? It's like the 10-year, 30-year.
The zoning map.
What is it? The development.
I'm gonna draw a blank on it.
I know what you're talking about.
But it's like the thing that they put out every, I don't know, 5-10 years.
Yeah, it's like their 15-year plan.
Yeah, maybe 15 or 20 years. But it's like a plan of where they want certain zonings to be, and that kind of helps indicate where the city wants the growth to happen. Well, it's like, why not in those, when you do that map, that study, you indicate not only the zoning, but also, like, certain areas that you are going to, like, have discounted impact fees on, because that would push incentivize builders and developers to buy up land in that area. The only kickback I'm starting to think of when I say this, though, is you're going to get, mad landowners saying, like, oh, the city's, making this land worth more than my land, because they're incentivizing development there. It's a hard thing to make everybody happy, but I think, like, the city's goal's got to be, like, how do we make the best run city? How do we develop the best running city that brings in the amount of money that we need, that's profitable, that doesn't have to charge as much in taxes? And yeah, you might have to piss some people off. I don't know.
So how does this work? Like, is the city only allowed to do impact fees on stuff that's in city limits? So for instance, like, is this why, Rockwell Homes goes and buys 40, 50, 60, 100 acres in the county, builds it all, they put in their infrastructure and all that stuff, but then they're in the county.
They can't
be annexed. It'll be annexed in later, I'm assuming.
I imagine there's still some kind of impact fee. You'll look at the roads that they're going to use to get all of those people to commute in and out of town.
Well, everything, I don't want to say everything, but most everything Rockwell buys has to get annexed before they actually do their development, because they're always tapping into city utilities. I don't know if Rockwell's done or a big developer's done a neighborhood or subdivision that's been on. You'd have to be on well and septic.
So, well, no. So, like, for instance, Red Rock, Berkeley, all those, they're in the county, but they're not run on Idaho Falls. They use like Iona water.
Okay.
They use, I think it's Iona sewer, and then you go through. It's not City of Idaho Falls garbage. You have to go through one of the other companies. So that's why I was curious on that. Like,
well, that opens a whole other can of worms.
Yeah, there's got to be. I mean,
what is the impact quantity? How do you quantify the impact of one home?
But then I also know with them, like, there was requirements on there that they made them do certain things if it were to be annexed in. So they had to put in like the sidewalks, they had to put in the street lights. So I was just curious how that worked. If they build in the county, it's not in the city currently, like, are they still paying impact fees, or what are the regulations like that they can make them do all those things so that it can be annexed at some point? I don't know.
That's interesting. I didn't know that the city would provide utilities out to homes and stuff in the county, but yeah, that's interesting, because obviously, again, that would incentivize a lot of developers to go outside of the city limits and try to find loopholes around how to save on cost to build. So yeah, I'm excited to see how this plays out. I hope, more than anything, I just hope that it forces the city to be more transparent. I hope that we as taxpayers, as consumers in the area, like future home buyers, they can know, hey, I'm buying, the price of this home is the price of this because I got some improvement in infrastructure in the city. Like, or I'm paying taxes at X amount and the builder's paying impact fees at X amount because I am seeing some benefit and I know where that benefit is. It'd be nice to have that.
It feels like that's our job as realtors now, to educate.
Yeah.
With new transactions.
The one other interesting thing that I read that I saw is the Builders Association was saying that one of their arguments is that it's being imposed during the permitting process. And technically, even when I was reading through the city ordinance, it doesn't really clarify very much, but it's basically saying, like, if you have to pull a building permit, like, you could have the impact fees imposed on you. So even if somebody's trying to do like an addition to their home, residential, not even like a development, they could have these impact fees. And I remember a couple of years ago reading a story. It was in Washington somewhere where somebody was basically adding like a 2-car garage to their house and something else and had to get a building permit. And the city came back and basically said they had to pay like a $60,000 impact fee to widen the road or something, when them adding the garage had no impact on this. It's not like they were building new residential. It wasn't increasing the population in the area. But I'd be curious to see what the city has to say about that and what their thoughts are on that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the hard thing. I hate when you can just, there's no rhyme or reason to it, but then it's just like, we did an impact study and we now think that you need to be charged X amount.
And it's because the population has changed in that area since they first bought their home.
Yeah.
But what is them doing in addition
to their garage? Yeah.
Does that do anything to do with?
No more amount of people are going to live here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No
Cars
more
are the
amount.
same.
Yeah.
Commutes are the same.
That's crazy.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. Imagine like going to pull a permit to finish your basement. They're like, nope. You looks like you're going to have more kids. Impact fee.
But according to the ordinance, I mean, it's worded that they can do that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's where I think people, they want to put a limit or have some more strict guidelines on how this stuff is going to get broken out. Because especially when stuff is new, and obviously this is new to the city of Idaho Falls, when stuff is new, it's really vague when it comes out. And they do that on purpose because they don't have everything figured out. So they're going to keep things super vague to make sure that they're still fitting within their parameters that they set. It'd be nice to be like, let's clamp down on this and make this more.
It has to be a catch-all.
Yeah.
Otherwise, everyone can get through.
I mean, if they make it too vague, though, then they have no accountability because they leave themselves open to having more wiggle room and not as much accountability because, yeah, they don't know exactly what they're doing because they haven't done this before. But at the end of the day, when you're pulling developers' money and taxpayers' money, there has to be accountability. Like, you have to show this is what it's for, this is what we're using the money for.
Are you asking for accountability in government?
I am.
Oh my, novel.
Off with his head. How dare him?
How incredulous.
At the end of the day, we've put these officials into place to take our money and
We put them into place to take our money.
Yes.
well, okay.
Not collect when freely given.
At the end of the day, I think most people understand, we are a community. We pay into this community. We have parks, we have hospitals, we have, services, we have utilities. I mean, if you don't pay taxes, you don't have roads, you can't flush your toilet. You can't do these things, okay?
Correct.
But I think to the best knowledge we have, we take people's word for it. We put these elected officials into place to take that money and do the best that they can with it. Is everybody perfect? No. But I think that if people are putting forth their money, there needs to be transparency and accountability. If you're not doing a good job, then we will elect somebody else next time, and that's fine. But to just kind of hide it and try to not really let people know what's happening, that's when people get upset. That's when people get pissed off.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, they're working hard. They're giving their money. And if they don't feel like it's going somewhere, it's not having a benefit in the community, even if it is having a benefit, but they are never told that, they're going to be upset.
He sounds like a great mayor.
No, I don't.
Mayor.
I don't want to be a mayor.
Mayor Devin.
No.
Mayor Homer, welcome home.
And I understand it's easier said than done.
100%.
For sure.
But I feel like that needs to be a goal of Idaho Falls. And I know that they're in a tight spot because we had a huge influx of people move here over the last 2 years. But it's not an excuse to not be transparent.
Yeah.
Like, just say, hey, this was something that caught us off guard. We weren't prepared for it. We're doing the best we can. These are the things that we're implementing to try that. Be transparent. If things aren't working, own up to it, make changes to the ordinance and make addendums to it. But trying to pretend like everything's fine, that's where there's going to be issues.
I think there should be a timeline rebate option, right? You're going to build this development. We're going to charge you these impact fees. And within the next 5 years, if we haven't reached that, impact capacity, then we'll rebate you and refund you a portion. But instead, it's just like, hey, we're just going to take it because we feel impactful on your wallet. And you know what? We're feeling it.
Yeah, it's what drives me nuts. Imagine running a company where I come and do a service. You hire me to do a service or whatever. Like, let's say we elect our government, hire them to do a service for us. Help run the country, and then they're like, but you never know what your invoice is going to be.
We'll give you a total, but it's not. Is it individual or for the whole city? Guess.
Like,
you'll find out both.
That's what drives me nuts. Like, with that, even with taxes, it's like, hey, how much do I owe in taxes? Well, I don't know. How much do you think you owe in taxes? Well, I don't know. Well, read our kind of vague guidelines. See if you can find loopholes, and then pay what you think.
And if you're wrong, jail.
And if you're wrong, jail.
Right to jail.
And if you pay over,
we'll keep it.
We'll keep it.
We'll call it the stupid tax.
Literally taxes. How much do I owe? Well, we know. We're just not going to tell you. Like, you need to figure it out. Well, how will you know if I paid enough? Well, we know.
We're going to hire...
We keep a record.
Thousands of people to make sure you pay enough. But we can't, these group of individuals can't just say, this is exactly what you owe. And I don't want to say this is a bad thing because I'm like, well, I guess the tax game it's a game. The tax code is a game. And I guess they've built in certain tax laws that incentivize certain things. And so, but it's just funny. It's like,
but if you just view it from a consumer standpoint, let's say I go to a builder and I want to have him build me a house. So I say, okay, I'd like to have you build me a house. This is kind of, what I want. He's like, okay, it's going to be $800,000. And I say, oh, okay, do you have a bid or breakdown? He's like, well, no, it's $800,000. Like, just trust us. We did I figured it out.
I did a study.
I did a study. I talked to some people, ran some numbers. It's $800,000. You're like, are you going to have him build your house? Like, no, because you want to, whether it costs $800,000 or not, it could very well cost $800,000, but you want to see the breakdown. Hey, he talked that framing's going to be this much. This is how much for paint, drywall, all this stuff. And it justifies it and you feel good about it. Mm-hmm. So it's not necessarily the $800,000. It's just you want the transparency of what went into that.
Yeah. I think for the longest period of time, government agencies and city agencies have just gotten so used to being able to, I don't want to say pull the wool over people, but like people didn't care. They didn't really ask as much. But I feel like nowadays people have lost trust. They've lost trust in the city. They've lost trust in, I don't want to say locally, but like just on a national level, it just feels like people have lost trust in the system. And they're finally starting to say like, enough is enough. I want to know. I'm like, where is this stuff going to? What is like, why are we in this massive debt as a country?
And think about this from our standpoint. I think this wasn't a problem in Idaho Falls before because we were small enough. We didn't have enough growth where it didn't matter. Like,
Yeah.
people paid their taxes. Things got taken care of. The roads got plowed. Ambulances showed up when you called. Like, it was fine.
Yeah, your
Things were
parents were buying a 5-bedroom house for like
Yeah.
3 raspberries and $10K.
good.
Like,
Things were good. But as we're growing, we're seeing some of these growing pains. I mean, I can't even imagine living in New York
oh man,
where the population is crazy and your freaking taxes on your property taxes are like $200,000 a year on some of
Yeah.
these. I mean, that's
Dead
insane.
serious.
Like, that's crazy.
Yeah.
So
And maybe like we're now paying the price for having such low taxes for the last, several decades. Granted, taxes did go up in like 2022 substantially from where they like across the board. And it's funny because like your tax, the peak of the real estate market was like what, probably June 21 or so was the peak. And it's like your tax assessment in 22 came out like crazy, but like the market had went down like 12%. So it's like my home, I could not sell my home for what you just gave my tax assessment on. But they're saying, well, your tax was assessed on 2021's value. So like everything that they're looking at is comps and sales prices within 2021. One thing that's interesting that I don't think a lot of people know is everybody always says that that Idaho is a non-disclosure state. Literally, the county tax assessor has access to our MLS.
yeah,
So he can literally see all sold data. Like, so I don't understand.
who said it was an NDA state?
We're a non-disclosure
Oh, I
state.
see.
Yeah, like Idaho is one of the last remaining non-disclosure states, but it's like, what does that actually mean if the county tax assessor has access to the MLS?
Who are we not disclosing to?
Yeah, exactly. Who is not knowing the price?
Yeah.
basically just the public.
Yeah. I guess your neighbor doesn't know what you bought it for,
Yeah, the government's going to have access,
but everybody else does. So anyway, any last thoughts you guys want to share on the impact fees and this lawsuit with the city?
not necessarily. I mean, I just like to, in the comments and stuff, hear your guys' opinions on what you guys think about the transparency, what you guys think about, the impact fees and how this has been a new thing. If you've heard anything about the lawsuit that maybe we didn't talk about and want to mention in the comments.
Yeah. Love that. Emma?
I think it'd be really interesting. Maybe I would just admonish the city to maybe just ask the public how they feel impacted. What are their pain points? Do they actually need a wider road? I don't think Fremont needs to be wider, but I'd love a crosswalk between Presto.
Do we need another roundabout? Do we need another median?
Do I need another car wash?
Yeah,
Not
there
sure.
it is.
But if
There
it
is.
snows, I would love a plow to come up the road.
Yeah.
Basic needs.
You know what? My last thought on this, just because like when we were saying like Devin, you'd be a great mayor, and you're like, no, I don't want to be a mayor. When is the last time you heard somebody that like wanted to work for the city?
I mean,
Jace Wright, Shelley.
oh yes.
Yeah, Jace would be good. And my thought is there is like, we don't have a lot of people like competing to work for the city. So we're not getting like top tier talent. And if like you're running a business and it's like you're not getting, how do you get more top tier talent to be interested in your business? Like the city is a business, right? Like essentially they're running as not for profit business, but they're running a business. Like you need talented people in there if you want to run the best city. It's like, how do you motivate more people to get in there? How do you?
You either have to pay a lot of money or you have to piss somebody off enough where they want to just come in and make change.
I think the third less violent option is like, I don't know that people are, this is going to sound bad. I don't know that people are educated enough to know exactly who is in what position and what that position is for, what they have control over and input and impact on. And I think if people knew that, they'd be like, oh, not only could I do that, but I'd rock it. And I also have a lot of thoughts. And I think that interest would be gauged. But right now we're like, meh. I don't know. They just sit down there and they make impact fees,
Yeah. No, it's true. It's like, how do you, I think there's a lot of, how do you make government jobs or like city official jobs just more exciting and fun? And I feel like the culture in like most government facilities is just like kind of doom and gloom and like not super positive. And I just think a lot of people like, and I think the problem is like, we just don't have a lot of young individuals in any of these positions. Like a majority of people are just old. They're kind of fed up with the system. They're just like, that's the way it is. Like, it's the way it's done. It'd be nice to try to get more young individuals into like those kind of either government or city jobs. But and I think you're right, you have to pay more. And I don't know how you do it without going in, like increasing taxes. And so I don't know if it's an option, but I'm like,
yeah, I think maybe them getting involved a little bit and trying to do some programs to maybe get into the high schools or something like that, and make more awareness of what jobs are available and what it could look like to be in government, or have some shadowing opportunities or something like that. And they may have programs like that, but I haven't heard about it.
I've never seen
you guys have.
Yeah.
Just because I think that's probably the biggest thing is just awareness. And I don't know. I mean, honestly, when we were closer to the Rexburg area, you know, the mayor up there, he's everywhere. I mean, we would see him all the time. We'd see him at golf tournaments. We'd see him at community events and things like that. And we've been up here now for 7 or 8 years. And I don't think I've ever met the mayor.
Mayor Casper?
No.
Yeah.
And I'm sure she goes to like some events but maybe they're events that some of these older people are
private
at.
events.
You know what I mean? Private events, things like that, not necessarily community events or things that maybe like the younger generation would be at. And so maybe that's something too that she could get involved with to kind of spark some interest in the younger generation.
Yeah. I think there needs to be more. I don't know how you can run a successful organization if you don't have, and not saying that they're not talented people in those positions right now, but like, how do you keep that funnel going? You should always be prospecting, trying to get new blood in there with new ideas. And like, does anybody are we doing anything with AI? Like, are we automating anything within the city? Like, what and why not? Does anybody even know how to do anything there? Is anybody in any of those jobs like messing around and learning like the new tech that's coming out? And it's like, if not, like, how do you get new blood in there that is, so that we can cut some costs? There's probably a lot of jobs that could, get reduced. Payroll could get reduced quite a bit if like we could automate or offload a lot of these like simple paperwork jobs and
combine some roles because they're not as loaded down with this busy work stuff.
Yeah, it's like that's how you free up some cash flow and create money for infrastructure. And so, yeah. And like right now, it's like, I almost feel like if you go work for the city, it's like you're serving your city. And I'm like, man, life's hard enough trying to make it work financially in today's market. It's really hard to want to go serve in a lower paying job just for the feel good of. I think that maybe was a previous thing. Like, I'm going to go serve my city and do this term in whatever.
Yeah, basically just have pride in my community, and that's why I do this.
Little sticker.
Yeah,
I
like
served.
that probably, and it can't fly nowadays because you literally can't live. You can't make it work. It's so hard with the cost of living and everything. Like, I feel like we do fairly well, and I'm like, I still feel like it's really hard to get ahead. And I'm like, dude, how do you, if you have a minimum wage job or you're making, I'm not going to say numbers because I don't want to create any connotation with those numbers, but like, it's really hard for a lot of people. And so I'm like, you're not going to get, no kid that's grown up that wants to like make money is going to go be like, I want to work for the city. But like, how do you change that? I think the only way you change that is be able to pay more. The only way you're going to be able to pay more is if you can cut payroll and other jobs that you can like automate with technology. And anyway.
Or you could charge a lot of impact fees and not tell anybody
or
where
you
it goes.
could charge a lot of impact fees and raise taxes. So
yeah.
Anyway, that's not the solution we want. Okay. Well, I think that's going to wrap it up for us. I love Devin's input there. If you guys we'd love to hear your input in the comments. Like, what do you feel about the impact fees? How do you feel like has it affected home values? If you're a builder or a builder out there, like, we'd love to hear your feedback on how these impact fees have impacted you. So, okay. Well, appreciate you, Emma, coming on the show. And we'll catch you guys on the next episode.